You think too small, why your mind is capping your net worth. Written by Ronnie Rowland. Published by Growth Literacy Lounge. Most people think they're stuck because of money. But the truth is, they're stuck because of how they think about money. You could double your hours, add 5 new skills, and still hit a wall, because that wall isn't out there. It's in your mind. It lives in quiet thoughts like people like me don't earn that much, or success comes with too much pressure. These thoughts don't shout. They whisper, and over time, those whispers build an invisible ceiling. Money isn't magic. It doesn't care how old you are, what school you went to, or what kind of family you came from. It follows clarity. It grows in the places where it's allowed, and the strongest force shaping your financial life is not your budget, your resume, or your job title. It's your beliefs. Your mindset is the blueprint. If the blueprint says small, you can build all day and still feel cramped. Somewhere along the way, we started calling this stuff mindset like it was extra, like it was fluff. But it's not fluff, it's the frame. It decides how big your vision gets, how much you're willing to ask for, how boldly you step forward when the moment comes. There's a reason Henry Ford once said, "Whether you think you can, or you think you can't, you're right." It's not just about confidence, it's about how deeply your thoughts shape what you even try to reach for. This book isn't about working harder. It's not about tips, tricks, or spreadsheets. It's about going deeper into the part of you that decides what's possible. Because no matter how much action you take, if your identity still says not yet, then the results will always reflect that. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. The effort looks impressive, but the results stay the same. Here's the quiet truth: your next level of income doesn't live in someone else's hands, it lives in your own belief system. If you can see that, really see it, everything starts to change, not all at once, but deeply, and for good. Let's go there together. This is not a race. It's a rise. One clear, honest shift at a time. Chapter 1. The Hidden Ceiling. You can live inside a mansion and still feel caged if the walls are built in your mind. Most people walk through life bumping into boundaries they can't see. Invisible ceilings, inherited ceilings, ceilings so quiet they become background noise in the architecture of thought. We don't question the shape of the room because we were born inside it, but income, like water, rises only to the height of the container that holds it. And for most, that container is not their job or their skills, it's their sense of worth. Early in life, we absorb a language that whispers what we're allowed to want. Be modest. Be grateful. Don't reach too far. These phrases don't sound cruel. They sound like love, but when repeated long enough, they become bricks in the ceiling. Subtle, unexamined, and permanent until noticed. Over time, we begin to mistake these beliefs for reality itself. We say things like, "I'm just not the type of person who makes 6 figures," or "I could never run a business," as though those were statements of fact, not of programming. And this programming isn't malicious, it's simply inherited, passed down from generations who survived by thinking small, because dreaming big once came with risk. Wealth isn't complicated, but it is particular. It responds not to effort alone, but to clarity and permission. Not the permission of the world, but the permission we give ourselves to see beyond our current story. The truth is, your mind has been running a quiet accounting system since childhood. It has been measuring what you believe you're worth based on the roles you've played, the praise you've received, the ceilings you've observed, and like a thermostat, it regulates your experience. If too much opportunity enters the room, it finds a way to cool it down. If you try to rise, it reminds you of who you've been. This internal mechanism is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Because the longer it remains unexamined, the more it controls. It will make you dismiss job offers that pay more. It will convince you you're not ready to ask for the raise. It will pull you into projects that maintain your current status rather than expand it, all while whispering that you're just being realistic, and that's the cruel genius of the hidden ceiling. It doesn't scream, it hums. A soft, consistent noise that blends into the hum of your thoughts until you forget it's not truth. It's just familiar. To escape a mental ceiling, you don't need to break it, you need to stop believing in it. The first step is awareness, not dramatic change, just noticing. Begin to see how often your thoughts return to a financial set point, How many of your choices are quiet defenses of that number? How often you play small, not out of logic, but out of loyalty to a script written long ago? This noticing is powerful. Because what you observe, you begin to soften, and what you soften, you begin to reimagine. Your potential was never capped by reality. It was capped by proximity, by the ideas and people around you that felt normal. But normal is not the same as true. And what feels safe is not always what's right. There is no external barrier keeping you from higher income, deeper contribution, or financial peace. There is only the story you've been handed, and the ceiling it built when you weren't looking. The first crack in that ceiling begins not with hustle, but with sight. Look up. Look around. Ask what if more is possible, not someday, but now. That question does something radical. It turns the mind from container to creator, and that, quietly, is how the ceiling starts to vanish. Chapter 2: The Hustle Trap. There is a kind of motion that looks like progress but goes nowhere. It burns hours, consumes energy, and leaves you exactly where you started, only more tired. This is the hustle trap. It is praised, romanticized, even spiritualized, but at its core it is a dance of desperation disguised as discipline. We glorify the grind because it feels like effort, and effort feels like virtue. But a wheel can spin furiously and still be stuck in the mud. Most people live in cycles of exertion that reinforce their current income, not expand it. They work longer hours, take on more clients, launch side hustles stacked on top of their main job, all while believing they're doing what it takes to grow. But the ceiling remains. Not because they aren't trying, but because the direction of their effort is governed by outdated beliefs. The mind says, I must earn more, so I must do more. It rarely pauses to ask whether more doing leads to different outcomes, or just more of the same. Hustle is seductive because it feels righteous. It gives you something to point to when life feels unfair. You can say, at least I worked hard. But hard work without elevation is labor, not leverage. It doesn't change your station. It just deepens your groove in the one you already occupy. The trap is not in the work itself, but in the reason for the work. When you believe money is earned by suffering, your subconscious will make sure you suffer. It won't let you receive with ease. It won't let you scale with joy. It will sabotage simplicity because it feels undeserved. This is not laziness, it's misalignment. Like pouring more water into a leaking bucket, no amount of effort will shift your wealth if the container hasn't changed. That container is your identity, your sense of what's acceptable. And that sense often tells you that true success must cost you, that you must earn the right to abundance through fatigue. But that's a script, not a law. It's a story passed down by those who didn't know another way. And the mind clings to it because it offers certainty. If I just work hard enough, things will change. But what if change doesn't respond to force? Wealth responds to insight. It responds to clarity, and clarity doesn't always arrive in a frenzy. Sometimes it arrives in stillness. In a moment of realization that says, this effort isn't taking me anywhere new. That's a sacred moment. Because it calls for a shift, not in hours but in altitude. Instead of asking, how can I work more? You begin to ask, how can I think differently? That question doesn't get celebrated as much. It doesn't produce sweat, but it has the power to rewire your trajectory in ways hustle never could. There is nothing noble about being busy for the sake of being busy. Movement is not the same as growth, and not all work is valuable, even if it's exhausting. The key is not to abandon discipline, but to direct it toward design. What am I building? What does it lead to? Am I solving a $100 problem or a $10,001? These questions separate those who chase income from those who expand it. Because real wealth doesn't emerge from friction, it emerges from leverage. And leverage is born from seeing a bigger picture. In the quiet space beyond hustle lies something more powerful, the ability to choose your effort wisely. To work not from panic, but from vision. To know that ease is not laziness, and rest is not weakness. That the person who earns most is not the one who suffers best, but the one who solves wisely. When you realize that, the trap dissolves, and in its place you find something rare, a way of moving that is purposeful, sustainable, and truly free. Chapter 3: The Value Shift. There is a silent pivot that changes everything, and it begins with one idea: money does not reward effort, it rewards value. This is not a motivational slogan, it is the structural truth of every economy. The world doesn't pay you for how much you sweat, it pays you for what your presence solves. This is why two people can work the same hours, carry the same stress, and live in entirely different financial realities. The difference is not in how hard they work, but in how high they think. Effort has a ceiling. Value does not. You can only stretch your day so far before your time runs out, but the magnitude of problems you solve, the level of insight you bring, the scale of your imagination, these have no limits. And yet, most people anchor their self-worth in effort. They wear exhaustion as a badge, not realizing it's also a lock. The more they rely on effort to feel worthy, the less they trust ideas that flow easily. If it didn't cost them everything, it must not be worth anything. This belief system is a quiet thief. It robs them of the permission to think big. Value is not measured in minutes, it's measured in impact. What changes because of you? What problem did you make disappear? And how deeply does someone need that problem solved? The bigger the pain, the higher the willingness to pay. This is not cynical, it's mathematical. And once you understand it, your relationship with income transforms. You stop asking, how can I earn more this month? And start asking, what's a bigger problem I can solve this month? That question opens doors no grind ever could. But to shift into this mindset, you must let go of old patterns. The belief that your output defines your income is deeply rooted. It feels fair. It feels moral. And because of that, it's hard to challenge. But fairness is not how wealth is distributed. Clarity is. When you see clearly where the real levers are, you stop pulling the wrong ones harder. You begin to notice that a conversation can be more valuable than a week of tasks, that a single insight can earn more than a month of meetings, that a better offer can outweigh 10 more clients. Thinking in terms of value requires trust in your mind, not just your hands. It means honoring the ideas that come in silence. It means not dismissing your intuition when it suggests a leap. It means believing that your ability to connect, to simplify, to design solutions, is worth something, even if it feels effortless. And this is where many people falter. They believe value must feel like sacrifice. So when they experience flow, they downplay it, they lower the price, they add more steps, they dilute what was already enough. To live in the value mindset is to become a different kind of worker, not one who hustles blindly, but one who listens for resonance, who notices patterns, who studies what people need before rushing to provide. It's a quieter intelligence, a subtler form of power, but it's the kind that scales. Because when you orient around value, you begin to design your life around results, not routines, around purpose, not performance, around depth, not noise. The world changes fast. But the principle of value does not. It has always been the undercurrent of wealth, and once you step into its rhythm, you stop chasing, you start creating. Not from stress, but from vision. You become a builder of bridges between need and solution, between confusion and clarity, between pain and peace. And in that role, your income becomes not a ceiling to push against, but a reflection of how deeply you've decided to serve. Chapter 4: Identity as Income. You will never consistently outperform the story you believe about yourself. Not in relationships. Not in health, and certainly not in wealth. Identity is the foundation of all financial experience, and yet most people chase income without ever examining the character they've cast themselves as in the script of their lives. They try to play the role of high earner while still identifying as someone who just gets by. This misalignment creates friction, and that friction shows up as self-sabotage, hesitation, and underpricing masked as humility. There is an internal thermostat that governs our earnings, and it is set not by the world but by our self-perception. If you believe deeply and unconsciously that you are a $60,000 per year person, the mind will find ways to normalize that level. It will reject offers that exceed it. It will delay actions that could elevate it. And when windfalls come, they often disappear just as quickly, not because of bad luck, but because identity seeks homeostasis. The financial thermostat always pulls you back to your internal definition of enough. This is why strategy alone is never enough. You can learn all the tactics, follow all the experts, even land higher paying opportunities. But if your identity hasn't risen with your income, you'll find a way to return to where you began. because it feels familiar, and the mind prefers familiarity over expansion. It would rather be consistent than abundant. It would rather be right than wealthy. So it defends the old identity, even when that identity is quietly costing you everything. To shift your income, you must first shift the story. Who are you allowed to become? Not by the standards of your past, but by the possibility of your future. Can you see yourself as someone who earns with ease, who leads with clarity, who receives without apology? If that image feels uncomfortable, it's not because it's wrong, it's because it's unfamiliar. Growth always begins in unfamiliarity. The seed does not resemble the tree, but it contains it. Most people resist identity shifts because they confuse them with ego. They fear becoming someone they're not, but becoming is not pretending. It's remembering. It's removing the layers of scarcity and smallness that were never yours to begin with. Beneath the conditioning, there is already a version of you who knows how to thrive, who sees money not as proof of worth but as a mirror of value, who understands that generosity flows best from overflow, not obligation. This identity is not built through affirmations or surface-level mindset tricks. It's built through alignment, through acting as if the new version of you already exists, not with arrogance, but with integrity. It's in the decisions you make, the spaces you enter, the standards you enforce. You don't wait to feel worthy, you build worthiness through repetition. You begin to ask, what would someone at this next level do here? And then you do it. Over time, the action reshapes the identity, and the identity reshapes the income. Your financial ceiling is not determined by the economy, your boss, or your resume. It is determined by the edges of your self-image. When you expand that image, the numbers follow, not instantly, but inevitably. Because the world reflects what you believe about your role in it. If you show up small, it responds accordingly. If you show up whole, it does too. The shift is subtle, but its effects are massive. You are not here to survive your financial life. You are here to express through it, to build, give, receive, and circulate. And that begins by seeing yourself not as someone trying to reach wealth, but as someone already capable of holding it. When that becomes your identity, your income simply catches up. Chapter 5. Releasing the scripts. You were taught things about money long before you ever touched it. These teachings didn't come in lectures or textbooks. They arrived in glances, in overheard arguments, in the tone of a parent's voice when the bills were due. They were absorbed, not chosen. And over time, they formed scripts that run quietly beneath the surface of your financial life, shaping your decisions, defining your limits, and muting your potential. The most powerful beliefs are the ones we don't know we have, because they operate as truth. Consider how many of your thoughts around money feel like common sense. Don't be greedy. Save for a rainy day. Money doesn't grow on trees. These sayings wear the costume of wisdom. They sound humble. They sound safe. But many of them are not wisdom, they are residue. Residue from generations that struggled, from systems that reinforced scarcity, from cultures that equated lack with virtue. And when these scripts go unexamined, they become blueprints, invisible, inherited, and deeply constraining. We don't question these scripts because they feel like protection. To want more than you were raised to expect can feel disloyal. It can feel like betrayal. If your family struggled, if your community frowned upon wealth, if your early experiences tied abundance to arrogance, then you likely carry a subconscious ceiling, not because you're incapable, but because you're loyal. Loyalty is quiet. It doesn't scream. It simply whispers, stay where it's safe, stay where we've always been. But safety is not the same as peace, and what kept your ancestors alive may be keeping you small. To break these scripts is not to disrespect where you come from, it is to evolve what was never finished. It is to honor the struggle by refusing to repeat it. The most loving thing you can do for your lineage is to thrive, not through hustle or ego, but through clarity. Through the quiet courage to say, this belief helped them survive. But I am allowed to live differently. That shift is not loud, but it is radical, because it reclaims the pen. It lets you write your own financial story. Many of the beliefs you carry were installed during moments of vulnerability. Maybe you watched your parents argue about money. Maybe you felt guilty for asking for too much. Maybe someone praised you for being low maintenance, and you internalized the idea that needing little made you lovable. These moments calcified into beliefs, and those beliefs became your financial operating system. The tragedy is not that you were shaped, it's that you never updated the shape. You're still using code written for a version of you that no longer exists. But here's the quiet miracle: once a belief is seen, it loses its grip. The spell breaks not through force, but through awareness. Begin to notice. When you hear yourself say, "I can't afford that," ask if it's true, or just rehearsed. When you think, "That kind of money isn't for people like me," pause. Whose voice is that? Where did it come from? Does it belong to the future you want, or the past you've outgrown? These questions are not small. They are tools. Tools that loosen the grip of old narratives and invite new ones to emerge. You are not your scripts. You are the author. And authors can revise. This is not about blind optimism or pretending lack doesn't exist. It's about refusing to build your future with bricks from someone else's past. The scripts may always whisper, but they don't get to drive. Not anymore. You are allowed to want more. You are allowed to have more. And you are allowed to do it with peace, not guilt. Wealth is not a betrayal. It is a continuation, a way of saying, "Thank you for getting me here. I'll take it from here." Chapter 6: Internal Architecture. Every building rests on a blueprint. No matter how polished the exterior, the structure is only as strong as the invisible design holding it together. Your financial life is no different. It stands on an internal architecture, an intricate system of beliefs, boundaries, and assumptions about what is possible. Most people never revisit that structure, they just keep building. More effort, more hours, more strategies. But when the foundation is outdated, no amount of construction leads upward. The form begins to collapse under the weight of unexamined thought. The mind has a framework for everything it allows. It calculates risk based not on fact but on familiarity. It makes decisions through emotional memory more than logic. If your blueprint says wealth is unsafe, you will avoid it. If it says wealth is complicated, you will subconsciously choose paths that preserve complexity. These choices appear random on the surface, but they are perfectly aligned with the design below. And until that design is redrawn, nothing truly changes. You cannot upgrade your income without upgrading your internal code. But this kind of upgrade is quiet. It doesn't announce itself with vision boards or dramatic declarations. It begins with subtle realignments. You start by noticing where your architecture is misaligned with your goals. You want to earn more, but you recoil when someone mentions luxury. You want to invest in yourself, but guilt flares when it's time to spend. These inner contradictions are not flaws, they are signals, indicators that your structure needs revision. The revision begins not with ambition, but with honesty. What do you actually believe about receiving, about charging, about being seen as successful? Many of us say we want financial expansion, but carry internal blueprints designed for limitation. These blueprints are filled with fear logic. If I earn more, I'll lose connection. If I'm visible, I'll be judged. If I rise too fast, I'll fall even harder. These are not facts. They are rules written in moments of vulnerability, but they become laws until questioned. Rewriting the architecture means choosing alignment over identity preservation. You must be willing to let go of who you've been in order to become who you could be. That's not a casual shift, it's an emotional one. Because every upgrade to your financial structure requires a loss of the comfort found in old patterns, a loss of certainty. But in that space, something deeper emerges, a design that supports growth instead of containing it. Think of your internal structure like scaffolding. If it's too narrow, any expansion will feel like instability. You'll pull back, even if success is close. But when your structure expands, when it allows for more ease, more abundance, more responsibility, you stop collapsing under the weight of opportunity. You become someone who can hold more, not just financially, but energetically. Because the architecture of wealth is not only about what you build, it's about who you become in the process of building it. You are allowed to change your framework, to move from fear to trust, from scarcity to spaciousness, from defensiveness to receptivity. But it must be done deliberately. Just as an architect doesn't guess, you must be precise with your mind. Audit the beams of belief. Strengthen the corners of confidence, reinforce the walls of worth. This is the invisible work, the kind no one sees. But it is the most important work you will ever do. Because once the structure is sound, everything else rises naturally. You no longer hustle to stay afloat. You no longer chase opportunity, it finds you. You move differently, not because the world changed, but because you did, from the inside out. Brick by thought, beam by belief. Until the house you live in, internally and externally, finally matches the wealth you were always capable of receiving. Chapter 7. Calm Expansion. Growth is often imagined as loud. As breakthrough moments, fiery ambition, and a relentless climb towards something greater. But real expansion rarely moves that way. It unfolds like breath. Quiet, steady, undeniable. The kind of shift that doesn't demand attention, yet alters everything in its path. Calm expansion is the art of growing without tension, of allowing your capacity to stretch not through urgency, but through awareness. Most people chase wealth as if it's running away from them. They rush, they grasp, they attempt to force doors open. But force is a language the future does not speak. It resists compulsion. It yields only to vision, and vision doesn't come from panic. It comes from stillness. The mind needs space to imagine something larger. It cannot stretch while clinging. It cannot innovate while scrambling. That is why some of the most financially potent decisions happen in silence, not in motion, but in pause. Expansion begins with permission, not from others, but from yourself. The permission to think beyond the expected. To ask quietly radical questions like, what if I could earn 10 times more by doing less of what drains me? That question is not naive, it is architectural. It builds mental space for possibilities that cannot emerge in a crowded room of limiting beliefs. Calm expansion is not about reducing action, it's about refining it, doing less better. Solving bigger problems with cleaner focus, not to avoid effort, but to align it. You do not need to shout your way into a bigger life. You need to become someone who can hold it with peace. That begins with trusting that ease is not the enemy of growth. It's the companion of wisdom. There is nothing sacred about being busy, and there is nothing shameful about ease. In fact, the highest forms of contribution often look effortless. Not because they require no effort, but because the effort is placed where it matters most. Precision replaces panic. Intention replaces intensity. When you shift into this mode of being, you stop reacting and begin designing. You no longer measure your day by how much you did, but by how deeply you move the needle. You no longer equate speed with effectiveness. You begin to value the space between decisions as much as the actions themselves. Because in that space, new thoughts form, and with them, new outcomes. There is power in knowing that you can grow without the world's permission. That you can earn more without broadcasting every step. That your expansion does not require explanation, only embodiment. This is the essence of calm expansion. It doesn't seek approval. It simply unfolds. Like the way a tree grows, without applause. Without agenda. Yet unmistakably upward. You were not designed for chaos. You were not built to live in constant pursuit. You are capable of great things, but not at the cost of your nervous system. Calm expansion is not only more sustainable, but it is also more magnetic. Because people, opportunities, and ideas are drawn to clarity, and clarity lives in calm. Not stillness as in stagnation, but stillness as in strength. To live this way is to know that you are enough even as you grow. That expansion is not a correction for inadequacy, but an expression of alignment. It means trusting that the next level is not something you force your way into, but something you rise to meet, one centered step at a time. And in doing so, you become something rare, someone who grows not in spite of their peace, but because of it, someone whose life expands not from noise, but from quiet knowing. Chapter 8. Flow versus Force. There is a subtle difference between pushing and allowing, between grinding and gliding, and that difference defines the quality of your ascent. Force is loud. It tries to dominate outcomes, it rushes. It overcompensates. Flow, on the other hand, is quiet confidence. It moves with the current of clarity rather than against it. Most people are taught to force their way into wealth. They believe struggle proves worth, but in truth, it often proves misalignment. Force says, I must. Flow says, I can. That small linguistic shift reveals everything. When you live in force, you constantly measure yourself against imaginary deadlines, other people's progress, and internal narratives of never enough. Every task becomes a fight. Every decision carries weight. The work becomes heavy, and so does your presence. You may get results, but they come at a cost: burnout, anxiety, disconnection from the very life you're trying to build. Flow, by contrast, emerges from discernment. It asks, where is my energy naturally strong, and builds from there. It doesn't avoid difficulty, but it chooses which difficulties are worth holding. It honors seasons of deep work and seasons of rest without labeling either as failure. And most importantly, it doesn't mistake motion for effectiveness. In flow, you stop working to prove, and start working to align. The work itself becomes cleaner, sharper, and more meaningful. Discipline still exists in flow, but it's different. It's not reactive, it's rooted. You don't show up because you're afraid of falling behind, you show up because it honors your rhythm. This kind of discipline is sustainable. It fuels itself. You don't need to force yourself through dread. You begin to trust that not every moment needs to be maximized. That momentum can come from depth, not just duration. People who operate from force often ask, what more can I do? People who live in flow ask, what can I remove? This is not laziness, it's intelligence. Because the clearest path to higher income is not always through additional action, but through refined action. One powerful decision can replace 100 frantic ones. One aligned offer can outperform a month of scattered outreach. But to see these moves, you must step out of panic and into precision. Flow requires self-trust. It demands that you listen to your body, your intuition, your deeper knowing, and that you act from that place, even when it doesn't look productive to others. This is hard in a world that rewards exhaustion, but wealth is not built on appearance. It's built on consistency, and consistency is far easier when it feels like alignment, not warfare. To live in flow is to believe that your best results come not when you strain, but when you see clearly. It means building your business or career not just on effort but on resonance. It's the moment you stop asking, what's the hustle, and start asking, what's the harmony? The answers you receive from that question are often quieter, but they are deeper. They point you to systems instead of chaos, to creativity instead of urgency, to pace instead of panic. This isn't to say you'll never feel stretched. Great growth has its discomfort. But discomfort in flow feels like challenge, not punishment. It feels purposeful. It stretches your container without breaking it, and you leave the day not depleted, but expanded. Your wealth doesn't need more force, it needs more flow. It needs you clear, not clenched, present, not pressed. When you move from this place, things begin to click. Not because you worked harder, but because you worked in rhythm. And in rhythm you don't chase success, it begins to arrive, one breath aligned step at a time. Chapter 9: Trusting the Ascent. There is a moment in every climb where progress becomes invisible. You've left the ground but cannot yet see the peak. It is here, mid-air, without guarantees, that most people falter. They confuse stillness with stagnation, quiet with failure. Yet this is the most sacred part of the journey, the point where belief is not yet validated by results. The ascent is not always marked by motion. Sometimes it is marked by trust. Trusting the ascent means understanding that not all growth is measurable in real time. Seeds do not sprout the moment they are planted. Muscles do not strengthen during the lift, but in the stillness after. Likewise, wealth does not arrive the moment you change your habits. It arrives after your identity catches up. After your nervous system learns to receive without fear. After the world adjusts to the new signal you're broadcasting, not from your mouth, but from your presence. Most people quit not because it's too hard, but because it's too quiet. They mistake the absence of noise for the absence of progress. They change strategies, abandon visions, and lower standards, all because the external hasn't yet caught up to the internal. But transformation always lags behind decision. Just because you don't see it yet doesn't mean it isn't working. The soil never looks different until the roots have done their work. And by then, it's too late to stop the bloom. To trust the ascent is to stop interrupting the process. Every time you pivot out of fear, you send a new signal to the world: I don't believe in this yet. That signal matters more than your effort, because energy does not lie. You can post, pitch, and produce, but if your undercurrent is panic, the world feels it. It responds not to what you do, but to what you carry. And if what you carry is doubt, your results will be as inconsistent as your conviction. True Ascent asks you to hold your vision in the dark, and to anchor it not in evidence, but in essence. This is not blind faith. It is disciplined knowing. A knowing that says, even when it's quiet, I am rising. That kind of trust is rare. It's not taught in business books or productivity courses. It's cultivated in the moments when you want to run, and choose to stay, when you want to shrink, and choose to breathe, when you want to prove, and choose to listen instead. Patience, in this context, is not passivity. It's power. It means you've moved beyond the need for immediate validation. You are no longer ruled by short-term outcomes. You're playing a different game, one where depth matters more than speed, where the inner shifts precede the outer ones, and where timing is not your master but your mirror. What you wait for with faith often arrives with greater clarity and ease than what you chase with fear. There's a rhythm to your rise, and it's yours alone. Comparison is noise. Detours are natural. But if you can stay aligned with your truth during the quiet, you become unshakable when the noise returns. Because your foundation is not built on applause, it's built on alignment. You trust not just the path, but your ability to walk it, even when the ground feels soft. The ascent does not need to be proven to be real. It needs to be trusted. And the more you trust it, the steadier it becomes. Until one day, without effort or announcement, you look around and realize you are no longer climbing, you have risen. Not suddenly, but faithfully. One invisible step at a time. Chapter 10. Invisible Leverage. The most powerful forces in wealth creation are often the ones no one sees. They don't announce themselves with grand gestures or dramatic change. They slip quietly into your routines, into your beliefs, into the invisible architecture of your day. This is the nature of leverage. It works beneath the surface, multiplying impact without multiplying strain. And yet, most people chase visible effort, while ignoring the unseen multipliers that shape everything. Invisible leverage begins with thought. A single shift in perspective can recalibrate your entire financial trajectory. When you begin to view money not as a reward for labor, but as a byproduct of clarity, the whole system changes. You stop focusing on how many hours you worked, and start focusing on how valuable your decisions are. You realize that the quality of one insight can outweigh the quantity of 100 actions. That the right idea, at the right time, can open doors hustle never could. This kind of leverage is built slowly and silently. It shows up in who you talk to, what you consume, and how you think when no one is watching. It lives in the books you read instead of the news you scroll. In the way you respond to opportunity, not with fear, but with preparation. In the tiny upgrades, mental, relational, and emotional, that compound without ceremony. It doesn't feel like progress. Until one day it is. Most people miss this because they're trained to chase noise. They seek change that others can validate. But leverage is internal. It's the decision to simplify your offer, the email you almost didn't send, the moment you walked away from a distraction that looked like an opportunity. These don't make headlines, but they shift the floor you stand on, and from that stronger floor, everything else becomes easier. The truth is, the world does not reward effort. It rewards clarity multiplied by trust, clarity about your value. Trust in your voice, and the courage to act on both before the evidence appears. When those elements align, leverage kicks in. Suddenly your inputs remain steady, but your outputs expand. Not because you worked harder, but because you stopped leaking energy on misaligned paths. This is the paradox of leverage. It feels too simple. So we ignore it. We discount the value of the right mentor, the quiet hour of writing, the moment spent refining rather than rushing. But these are the levers. Not because they're magical, but because they direct your energy toward what actually matters. When you identify the highest leverage moves in your life, and commit to them relentlessly, you begin to experience disproportionate returns. Leverage also lives in identity. When you shift how you see yourself, you unlock access to strategies that once felt out of reach. A person who sees themselves as a creator solves problems differently than one who sees themselves as a laborer. A person who identifies as worthy prices their services differently, negotiates differently, and leads differently. And identity is a lever, and every small upgrade there lifts everything it touches. To build wealth sustainably, you must become fluent in this quiet language. the language of small hinges that swing big doors, the language of invisible alignment. Because the greatest gains are often hidden in plain sight, they don't scream. They whisper. And only those listening carefully will hear them. Your job is not to do more, it's to see more, to listen for what's working silently, to notice what moves the needle without draining the soul. This is not about shortcuts, it's about intelligence, the kind that respects effort but honors elegance, the kind that sees through noise and acts on truth. In that space, wealth becomes less of a climb and more of a flow, not louder but deeper, not faster but fuller, all because you finally trusted what no one else could see. Chapter 11: Bigger Problems, Bigger Peace. There is a quiet irony in the architecture of wealth. The more you grow, the bigger the problems you're asked to solve, and yet, the more peace you're required to hold. The untrained mind assumes that higher income equals more stress, more pressure, more complexity. But in truth, it is not the size of the problem that determines your peace, it is your capacity to hold it. Wealthy people do not escape problems. They simply rise to meet them from a different state of being. Most people seek safety in smallness. They choose problems that match their comfort zone. They avoid the ones that would stretch them, not because they're incapable, but because they fear the emotional weight of visibility, of leadership, of responsibility. But the size of the problem you're willing to solve determines the value you're allowed to receive. This is not punishment. It's design. Income grows in proportion to the magnitude of solution you bring into the world. And that means expansion is emotional as much as it is strategic. To earn more, you must hold more, not in your calendar, but in your nervous system. You must be able to sit with discomfort, with uncertainty, with the gaze of others who do not understand your path, and not react. This is the hidden work of high earners. They cultivate inner stillness in the face of outer pressure. They train themselves not just to solve problems, but to do so without being consumed by them. This is the practice of peace in the presence of power. True peace is not found in avoidance. It's found in expansion. In becoming the kind of person who can walk into a room full of tension and bring clarity. Who can navigate large decisions without collapsing into fear. Who can hold the emotional weight of wealth without shrinking under it. This doesn't come from books alone. It comes from experience, from choosing not to run when the moment stretches you, or from staying when leaving would be easier. There is dignity in solving big problems. Not because it makes you important, but because it makes you useful. You become a bridge, a stabilizing force, and in a world addicted to urgency, your calm becomes a currency. It sets you apart. It attracts trust, and trust, more than tactics, is what wealth follows. People don't buy from the loudest voice. They buy from the clearest one, the one that makes them feel safe, seen, and supported. But this peace is not accidental. It must be cultivated. You cannot wait for life to calm down. You must learn to carry calm within you. That might mean slower mornings, more space between decisions, boundaries that protect your focus, rituals that anchor your energy. These choices are not luxuries, they are levers. Because the more centered you are, the more complexity you can hold. And the more complexity you hold, the more valuable you become. Bigger problems require broader vision, and broader vision cannot grow in a cluttered mind. That's why the truly wealthy invest in clarity, not just in business, but in themselves. They don't just scale revenue. They scale their ability to respond without panic. They scale presence. They scale discernment. And in doing so, they become trusted containers for others. Not because they have all the answers, but because they can hold the question without flinching. This is your invitation, not to chase more, but to become more, not to fear big problems, but to recognize them as portals. Each one is a doorway to higher value, to deeper service, to a life shaped by intention rather than reaction. And when you step through with peace, the world expands in response, not in noise, but in quiet respect, not in chaos, but in the calm echo of someone who finally knows their strength. Take and be well.